Hi, my name is Elaine Evans. I am an extension educator at the University of Minnesota, and I'm here sharing another piece of our Pollinator Educator Toolkit. This one is available both as a poster and as a slide presentation. So I am going to, in this presentation, go over the through the slide presentation, but the information I'll share here works with a poster too, which should be self-explanatory, but I'll give you a little more detail about it. So the idea with these Pollinator Educator Toolkit pieces is that we are presenting these to be available to pollinator educators throughout the state of Minnesota, and people elsewhere can use them too. We will have physical kits for some pieces, and those will go to a set of people. And then we'll have these online options that will be available to anyone. And they are intended to be used by pollinator educators in your education program. So nature centers, 4-H groups, wherever you are wanting to share information about pollinators, we're hoping that these materials will be helpful for you. So the one that I am going to talk about right now is a poster and slide presentation called How Are the Pollinators Doing? Oops, sorry, it was not going forward. I want to mention that there is more information about the Pollinator Ambassador Toolkit pieces by visiting z.umn.edu/Pollinator Ambassador. These toolkit pieces were put together by the Bee Lab, which is in the Department of Entomology at the University of Minnesota, with support from the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund. So please do include this information so we can give proper credit to this generous funding that helped support us in making these materials available to you. The first section here is talking about why pollinators are important. So before we get into how pollinators are doing, why should we care about them? Pollination is a big piece of what makes up pollinators because they are doing this action called pollination. So that is what happens when pollen is being moved between flowers. Bees and other pollinators help plants produce fruits, seeds, and nuts. And some of that, as depicted in this picture, are some of these things are turning into food that we eat. Zooming out, it's over 80% of plants that rely on animals for pollination. So it's not just our food, but pollination helps plants create this habitat for countless other creatures. They help to feed the creatures that eat those creatures. They help to maintain soil and water health. These pollinators are important not just for our food, but because our ecosystem depends on healthy and diverse pollinator populations. Next, we're going to talk about which pollinators are in decline. A lot of people will ask, how are the bees doing? And with 20,000 different kinds of bees in the world, it really varies. Some pollinator populations are in decline, some are stable. And honestly, for most of those pollinators, we don't really know how they're doing. But this section talks about 3 groups of pollinators where we have some information to tell us how their populations are doing. For bumblebees, we have seen that 1 out of every 3 species of bumblebees, and this is true around the globe as it is in Minnesota, are in decline. So that means that 2 out of 3 are not in decline, or at least we don't see evidence of it, but it's a large proportion of the species. One of the species we have here in Minnesota that's in decline is the rusty patch bumblebee. It was once common throughout the state, and it is now facing extinction. Honeybees are actually not in decline. There's a lot of information about the health problems that they have. And so there's a lot of colony loss that can happen with beekeepers. But the actual number of honeybee colonies in the US is stable. And this is happening because beekeepers are able to raise more bees. So honeybees are different than these wild pollinators that are out living on their own. They are a managed pollinator, and because of that, they have this advantage where we know how to raise more, and we can replace their numbers when they have health problems. Monarchs are another iconic pollinator, and we do have evidence that monarchs are in decline, and we can see that from looking at the area that they're occupying at their overwintering sites in Mexico. People are able to go around and measure the area that is actually occupied by the monarchs that are overwintering there. And over the last 25 years, there's been a steady decrease in that area that's occupied by the overwintering monarchs. And this is reflective of not just problems that are happening at those overwintering sites, but it's also reflecting the population pressures that are affecting monarchs during the summer season when they're up here in Minnesota and other places in North America. What is causing declines? So there are a lot of challenges that pollinators are facing. Fewer flowers, this habitat loss and poor nutrition is really at the center of everything. But they are being exposed to a lot of different pesticides, different kinds of pesticides all the time. There are problems with parasites and diseases, and global climate change is also a challenge to these pollinator populations. One of the reasons why we don't just have one simple answer to what's causing pollinator problems is that many of these problems interact in ways that compound the damage done. So we can't just work on one of these pieces. We need to work on all of these pieces to help our pollinators recover from these challenges. The last slide of the presentation here is talking about actions to help pollinators. So this ties into another piece in the Pollinator Education Toolkit, which is a whole poster about actions to help pollinators. But we wanted to include this information here too, so that we don't just leave you with doom and gloom, but we let you know what you can do to help. So providing pesticide-free habitat is really important. Planting flowers, providing homes, collecting data is something that can really help in terms of getting out there and taking photos and sharing information, finding community science projects where we're collecting more detailed data, and you can find more about those actions on the 4 actions poster. And also taking climate action. So climate change is a big thing to look at, but there are things we can do, and everybody can work together to help to provide a more stable climate so that we can support pollinators and ourselves in the future. And if you want to learn more about any of these topics, there is more information at the Bee Lab website, beelab.umn.edu. And there are credits here for content and more information about where the data came from for the monarch poster, the monarch chart there. So, so I encourage you to share this presentation to let people know what to do. And it's a good one to pair with that 4 actions slide set and poster, which are part of the toolkit, and you can find out more by visiting the BeeLab website and visiting our Pollinator Ambassador section.